Yesterday, when our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford put out this statement, official statement, asking Bank of Canada to consider cutting rates. And the reason is because the Canadians are struggling with the higher interest cost. Well, when I looked at this statement, I was laughing, to be honest, because this is like saying the quiet part out loud that this central bank is not an independent organization. It is being politicized by putting the political pressure on them to cut rates. Well, this morning, Bank of Canada came out and announced that they're going to keep the rates at the current level, which is 5%, telling us that they're not in a rush to cut rates anytime soon. So that has killed all the hopes and the momentum in the housing market that we saw in the last month, anticipating a potential rate cuts and also hoping that the housing price will go up accordingly. And I made that video last time as well that this is going to be a short-lived momentum because it is just the narrative that is based upon the potential rate cuts. And when this appears to be incorrect, this will kill the momentum right away. And this is exactly what's happening in front of our eyes. And the reason is the economy is literally in gutter. Okay, so when you see the GDP number, it's barely above 0%. After importing 2 million people in this country. Okay, of course, GDP is all about spending, but when you look at GDP per capita, that is negative consistently over the last 6 quarters. So that tells you the story where the economy is moving. And why do I think that the rates will not go down or should not go down is because as soon as they start cutting rates, the housing will accelerate and so is the inflation. Okay, that is the last thing that we want in the current economic situation. And inflation is going to accelerate again. Why? Because next month we are seeing federal government is adding the new carbon tax, which is going to make our gas that we put in the car 17 cents a liter expensive, and the natural gas that we use for heating our homes, that will be 15 cents per cubic meter more expensive. So our heating bill and our gas prices will go up. And when these two things go up, and that is our transportation and energy inflation, okay, that will automatically inflate other stuff which is being transported across the country, like food items. So the inflation is likely to accelerate because of these new taxes. And as soon as you start cutting rates, this will add fuel to the fire. Okay, so nobody wants that at this stage, unless things start blowing up, literally like banks started blowing up, or the unemployment shoots up like 7% or 8%. Then of course they will start thinking about cutting rates aggressively because now they have to stimulate the economy. Right now the banks are not in too bad shape compared to the US banking system. But as I mentioned in my last video, if something happens in the US regional bank, this will have a spillover effect across the border as well, because all of these banks are intertwined, they are very much connected. And if we have a larger crisis in the overall banking system, this will have impact on the Canadian banks as well. So right now I think things are still kind of working, they're not breaking apart. And because of that, I don't see any reason why Bank of Canada start cutting rates at this stage. Maybe later if things become really messy. Right now it's not. And when I say things, which means unemployment has to go up or the banking system has to blow up. Okay, without these two, I'm not seeing any reason the Bank of Canada to cut rates, especially before the Federal Reserve. Today, Federal Reserve also announced that they're not in a rush to cut rates as well because they're seeing economy is booming. Like stock market all-time high, Bitcoin, breaking records. Right? Gold is all-time high. So nobody is talking about gold. Like if you look at the mainstream media, everybody is super focused on these Bitcoin ETFs and how these billions of dollars of capital, Wall Street capital, is flowing into these Bitcoin ETFs. And yet the gold prices is also breaking record, all-time high above $2,100 per ounce. And who's buying that? If Wall Street and average investor is buying Bitcoin ETF, who is buying gold in large quantities? The answer is it's the foreign central banks. Why? Because they are seeing that this whole fiat currency, especially the US dollar denominated debt, is going to explode. The US government is keep running larger and larger fiscal deficit. It's going to make US dollar less attractive from purchasing power perspective, and that will actually increase the inflation going forward. And when the central banks, especially the foreign central banks like China, Russia, India, and Turkey, when they looked at it, they're trying to get rid of the US dollar exposure as much as they can. And if they do so, what else are they going to buy? They're going to buy physical gold. And this is what we're seeing here, that these central banks are accumulating large amount of gold in anticipation of higher inflation going forward, volatility in the bond market, which will definitely put a lot of pressure on the US dollar from a global treasury absorbance perspective. And yet this will also have an impact on Canadian bond market as well. Okay, so if the international foreign entities are deleveraging themselves from US treasuries, what do you think is going to happen to Canadian bonds? Definitely that will also come under pressure, which means the yields on the bonds will go up. When the yields go up, the interest rate goes up, especially the ones that we pay on the street in terms of our mortgage rates, credit card rates, and personal loans and car loans. Okay, Bank of Canada can only talk about it and influence these rates, but the reality is the market determines the rate that we pay upon all of these type of debts: car loans, mortgage loans, personal loans. So there you go, guys. Gold is breaking all records. Bitcoin is breaking all records. Stock market is all-time high. Central banks are not in a rush to cut rates. And the Canadians are being worried about the higher and higher debt levels. This is my warning to you guys. If you have too much debt, consider deleveraging yourself, because the rates are not going to come down. Even if they do, you won't have resources to service that debt. Okay, we are just coming out of the historic lows of the interest rate. That cycle is over. Now we are going into another cycle that is going to be very much volatile and very much inflationary. And when you have inflationary cycles, the rates are likely to stay higher. That's going to be a more likely scenario. So I suggest, if you have too much debt, consider deleverage yourself. Things are going to get messy, and God forbid, if you lose your job and you have $1 million mortgage, you will be screwed big time. Okay, so consider deleveraging yourself. Get rid of the excess that you have. Only keep the one which is bare minimum, which is your shelter that you have to carry on. But if you have a lot of unnecessary debt, get rid of it as soon as possible, because things can get messy, and when they do, you will be in big trouble. Anyway, let me know what you think about that. Consider subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.